the whole aspect of mindfulness, of being non-judgmental, can you go into more detail regarding elements of mindfulness? Because some people might think, how in the world am I supposed to be non-judgmental? I'm always thinking, I'm always analyzing, I'm always viewing things. So how can I get to a place of being non-judgmental about myself and also others around me?
Right. This is such a good question. And as you said, so many kids, teenagers, they've really got that self-judgment, self-criticism just all the time. And it's not like social media makes this any better. Again, I was kind of kidding, but it does sometimes feel like, oh, they're making better bread in the pandemic and they're doing a better job with their kids in the pandemic, or kids thinking, like they look better on Zoom than I do in school, or all these other things that are just about comparing ourselves with other people. And it's so hard to step away from that critical voice. And I think what we can do is we can start to learn how to listen in to a more compassionate voice that we all have. Right? Turn up the volume on that a little bit. And we can also find ways to just not have to believe everything we think. Now, Taniesha, when we first got on, I said, I see the book on your bookshelf behind you, Carol Dweck's Mindset, right? Which
Yes.
is one of my favorite books. And I'm actually working on a kid's book about mindsets. But one of the things is that she teaches us is that we can get out of this fixed mindset and into more of a growth mindset, just with the simplicity of something like the word yet, right? I can't go outside and play with my friends. You can't do that yet, right? And thinking, I can't do math. I can't learn online. I can't read. Well, you can't do those things yet. And I think even during the pandemic, that's even more apparent, right? A lot of those things we can't do. We're locked down, or we're not able to go to school, or not able to see our friends and people that we love as much, but we still have that yet that we can put in there and remind ourselves that, we can't do those things yet. Or even just the idea that some of this, you get back to that critical voice, is just a thought, right? Something I do sometimes as a parent, as a therapist, is, kids will say, like I'm the least popular kid in school, or everyone else is better at soccer than me. Well, let's make a list of a couple of those things and just ask ourselves, are those really true? And maybe even writing in front of that, I'm having the thought that I'm the least popular kid in school. I'm having the thought that, I'll never be good at soccer, or something like that. Because it reminds us that actually those are just thoughts. Maybe it's true, but we don't actually necessarily know that. And that can actually help us get a bit of distance from our thoughts. And again, get into more of that growth mindset. And those are little kind of mindfulness without meditation tricks that I've heard people talk about. And I think those can be really empowering. When I tell teenagers they don't have to believe everything they think, they're like, whoa, that'd be cool. Right? To
Yes,
not
I can see that as a tip for parents when they see their children, or especially teens, going down the rabbit hole, is to say you don't have to believe your thoughts, and not all your thoughts are necessarily true. And I like the word yet. So I can't do X, Y, and Z yet. Is a way of really changing the mind from being so fatalistic about whatever thought is going on in the moment.
Yeah.
Mindfulness has been controversial for some people. Some people are wondering, is this a religious thing? Is this a spiritual thing? I'm agnostic. I don't know about it. What are some of the misconceptions of mindfulness that would be good to clear up, in case we have parents listening who are a bit skeptical about whether or not mindfulness is something healthy or appropriate for their children?
Absolutely. This is a really good question. And I just want to be clear that so many mindfulness practices have grown out of spiritual traditions, but so many of them also have not. And just like, reading can be something that's spiritual, or music can be something that's spiritual, mindfulness can be spiritual, or it can be totally secular, like reading or music or rock and roll or hip hop or whatever you listen to. And so we can think about mindfulness in the same way. Like, I think folks can bring it into their spiritual tradition if that feels like it strengthens their connection with a higher power, whatever it might be. Or folks can just really practice different mental focusing, mindful awareness practices that really we know help brain growth, help emotional development, help self-regulation, and that don't have to have anything at all to do with anything spiritual. So I think it's really important to just say that up front, that this isn't necessarily anything that's religious, although it can be if that's interesting to you. I also think, parents often worry, well, I don't want my kids to be like too relaxed, and I think one of the things that mindfulness does, I've heard, I think it was John Kabat-Zinn described it as, mindfulness isn't like we're falling asleep, right? Mindfulness is actually more like we're falling awake. We're active, we're engaged. It's not something that makes us passive. And we know the research actually really tells us that this is true also. Like, it can relax our bodies, but really what it helps our bodies and our brains do is just regulate themselves to be in the right place to meet the moment. Stressful moment, right? You can be stressed out, but you can recover quicker from mindfulness, right? So your stress is helping you, not working against you. But of course, we're all end up, most of us, with more stress than we need. So we can also use mindfulness to turn the volume down a little bit on that alarm system in our brains, the fight or flight response. And then we can be a little bit less stressed out and best we can meet the situation. It's not helpful to be stressed out every time you walk into the cafeteria or every time you start your homework. You want just enough so that you get your homework done, but not so much that your mind shuts down and you can't think clearly or write anything. Yeah. So these are some ways I think that are helpful for parents to understand.
And what would you consider? So you mentioned that mindfulness is very good to help us to regulate when we're experiencing stress. Are there any other tips or benefits rather of being mindful that would be, I guess, beneficial or interesting to parents when they hear, yes, my child is stressed out, it can help with stress, but are there any other benefits that's coming up, especially in research regarding children with when they practice mindfulness?
Absolutely. So we know that mindfulness can help with self-regulation, regulates our bodies, and then that in turn regulates our physiology, our nervous system, and our brains, so that kids can focus a little bit better. Again, whether that's in school or whether that's with friends or whether that's in the family, so that kids can regulate their emotions a little bit more effectively and not get so overwhelmed by different situations. And that they can also regulate their impulses better. A lot of us worry about how impulsive our kids might be. And so all of these help kids to make better decisions and to make better decisions in relationships, to make better decisions in the world. In the US, we talk a lot about helping our kids make better choices, right? So that's a lot of what that means. And then we know also in the research that mindfulness is really helpful with depression. It's really helpful with anxiety. It can be really helpful with attention deficit disorder, and all of these things that we might worry about for our kids in terms of mental health issues. And of course, we know during the pandemic, there's been so much anxiety, so much depression, so much difficulty that our kids have been having over the course of these last, year and a half, or, however long it's been now. And so mindfulness can actually be incredibly helpful in helping kids disrupt that stress response that leads to mental health issues, either now or down the road. And so that's where I'm feeling like mindfulness can be more important than ever to prevent a lot of mental health issues that we might start to see in our kids too.
And I'm happy that you spoke about the stress response, because that ties right into where we're going. We want to talk about stress. So yes, there's anxiety, there's depression that mindfulness can help. Overwhelmingly, everybody has been stressed for the past year going on. We don't know how long this will last. So explain to parents how their children's body respond to stress, the different kind of responses, and then we can maybe tie that into mindfulness somehow.
Absolutely. So one of the things that stress does is it causes us to go into basically what we would call the fight or flight response, right? If there's an animal chasing you, you want to fight it off, or you want to flee and run away. We can also have some other responses. We can go into what we might call the freeze, which is kind of like becoming camouflage, or just faint, which is like playing dead so that the animal doesn't attack us. So we have fight or flight, freeze, or faint responses. Now, these are great, for our ancestors when there's a tiger chasing you, but right now it's things like exams or deadlines or, other, social worries or things like that. Will I make the soccer team? Will I get an A on my test? And we go into fight or flight, freeze or forget it. But what happens over time is the fight response, that starts to change our brain so that our kids end up being more aggressive, getting into more fights. We don't want that. The flight response, keep avoiding things, that only makes the stress bigger. The more we avoid things, that leads to more anxiety disorders, panic attacks. We don't want that either. The freeze response, that's kind of like when we freeze up maybe on a test. You can hear my 3-year-old in the background.
Yes.
Hopefully not the fight or flight response. And the faint response, are kind of just like giving up on ourselves, giving up on the world, isolating. That turns into depression the more kids go into that response. So these are the ways that things can be really bad for our kids and lead to more mental health or behavioral issues. The good news is we've got not just fight or flight or freeze or faint, we've got responses like the attend and befriend responses that are also part of the stress response. And these are really, to me, mindfulness and compassion or self-compassion. And these start to activate the connection circuits, the social engagement circuits, the parts of our brain where we think things through in the long run, right? Where we can build relationships and start to calm our bodies down so that we can breathe better, we can digest our food, we can fall asleep, all these things we want to be able to do, and wire our brain for more of attending, showing up for, being present with difficult moments, and befriending ourselves and other people in a difficult moment. And so that's some of the ways that mindfulness can actually be its own almost response to stress and keep us out of that autopilot where we go into fight or flight, freeze and forget it, and develop all these mental health issues.